ठीक है, let us go to the features. Now, as I said, industrial revolution happened in multiple phases. Presently, some people say industry 4.0 की बात होती है, industry 4.0. So what is 1.0 and 2.0? उसकी बात कर ले, because that's a history for us. So we have 1.0 and 2.0. The first phase is from 1760s to 1830s. And second phase is afterwards for next almost more than half a century. In the second phase, we have other countries also like Germany, Russia, America, Japan. But right now we are focusing only on British. So British ka hi first and second phase dekh raha hai. We are not looking at any other country right now. So the important aspects of the first phase: mechanization of textile production, spinning jenny, power loom, water frame, etc. Flying shuttle. And that mechanization of textile industry led to development of the factory-based mass production. So technological innovation and organizational process-oriented innovation दोनों मिलके बनती है आपकी factory, which leads to mass production. Also, some other industries like iron making, coal mining, steam engine, etc. But the impact, the effect of these will start getting visible with the beginning of 19th century, not initially. So initially process काफी slow थी. It was still labor intensive. आपको लगेगा मशीन आके लेबर इंटेंसिव ना, आपने जो आंसर दिया शुरू में थोड़ा हाफ गलत था वो. In the first phase of industrialization, in the factory also, with long lines, the assembly line, not the way you perceive today, but long lines of machines, it was still very labor intensive. Machines से productivity बढ़ गई, but labor intensive था. And it was restricted to only England. It is in the second phase. You have the new industries coming up all together. Transportation, इसमें railroads, automobiles based on IC engine. We have communication, telegraph and telephone. By the end of the 19th century, telephone becomes there. Electricity generation, इसमें Thomas Edison, and distribution and heavy industry, steel and chemicals. तो ये industry popular होते हैं in the second phase. These are all capital intensive. So second phase में आते हैं capital intensive industry. And where does the capital come from? यहाँ का प्रॉफिट यहाँ लगेगा, और इसका कैपिटल कहाँ पे आएगा? प्रिमिटिव कैपिटल एक्यूमुलेशन. Primitive capital leads to first phase का profit leads to second phase. Now these people have the huge amount of capital generated. वो परेशान है, पैसे वो रखे कहाँ पे? India textile industry is completely saturated. We cannot invest anymore into it. There is negative return. Let us invest somewhere else. कहाँ? In the neighboring country, in France, in Germany. तो वहां पैसे लगा दिए, तो वहां की इंडस्ट्री बनना शुरू हुई. When those countries were powerful, उन्होंने कहा ना, we will not take any FDI. दरवाजे बंद, हमारे अपना कैपिटल है. तो अब इनके पैसे क्या करें? चलो कॉलोनीज में लगाते हैं FDI. तो फिर FDI पूरे देश इंडिया में आना शुरू हो गया. इंडिया का क्या हो गया? नुकसान. It led to more and more drain of wealth. There is no free money. There is never a free lunch in economy. Never ever. It is always going to extract more money from you. Anyway, so you have capital intensive industry, science based, machine based, capital intensive, and then capital is much more than what is required domestically. It overflows into continent and colonies, and impact is felt all over Europe. It is in the second phase that other countries start industrializing. So हम दोनों के थोड़े basics देख लेते हैं. So there was a question that UPSC asked many years ago. Whosoever says industrial revolution says cotton. So it is a statement by Eric Hobsbawm, अपने चाचा जी. अब there is another concept by Rostov. Rostov was American diplomat, but he gave many theories of economic growth in the Cold War era. तो Cold War में चलता था. So in his theory, he used the word called takeoff. मतलब क्या है कि आपका जो फ्लाइट होता है धीरे धीरे जाता है ऑन द रोड, और उठता है फिर ऊपर जाता है. तो ये जो नोज ऊपर ले कैसे जाना है, इट इज कॉल्ड टेक ऑफ. तो ऐसा कौन सा मोमेंट है इन योर ग्राफ ऑफ जीडीपी ग्रोथ? इफ यू हैव दिस ग्राफ ऑफ जीडीपी ग्रोथ, तो दिस मोमेंट बिकम्स टेक ऑफ मोमेंट फॉर यू. यहाँ पे थोड़ा छोटा सा इंक्रीज है, यहाँ पे सडनली मोटा बड़ा इंक्रीज है. So what is that leads to the sudden and huge increase in the production, increase in GDP? What is the takeoff? So Rostow ने कहा takeoff is generally iron industry and railway. Iron industry and railway. The second phase is the actual phase of industrial revolution when the takeoff happens. दुनिया में जहां जहां रेलवे गई है वहां वहां it has acted the takeoff because of backward linkage and forward linkage. But he also has agreed to say that for the first phase, which is a kind of proto-industrialization mode, इसको मान के चलते because the factory system तो है. So for the first phase, the cotton industry was the initial takeoff. So why? तो इसके आंसर में आपको सिंपल पॉइंट्स, ज्यादा कुछ मुश्किल तो है नहीं. Cotton was the main pillar of the first phase of industrialization. It expressed a new form of society, industrial capitalism based on new form of production, the factory. So नई society बनी, industrial capitalism, नई economic structure बना based on the factory. How it happened? First thing is that all the initial inventions were happening in the textile sector only. We have seen the examples. And these three specifically, spinning jenny, water frame, and spinning mule, made the formation of factory possible for the first time. Factory बनी तब पाई जब ये तीन चीजें बन गई थी. So second thing is factory production. And the organization of textile industry was transformed. Domestic handicraft manufacturing led to capitalist factory industry. Spinning began to be concentrated hereafter in factories, and weavers could now rely on constant supply of yarn. I hope you know yarn weaving, सब शब्द पता है ये. ठीक है, the mechanized cotton spinning powered by water or steam increased the production of the worker of a factory factor by 1,000 and productivity of loom by 40. So इतने गुना अधिक ज्यादा production हो रहा है, and it led to the mass market. So you have factory organization. Not only that, labor. We have Eileen Dean. She was a Cambridge professor, and she has written a fantastic book in 1960s or 70s, I don't recall, Industrial Revolution, the first industrial revolution, in which she says it was not only industry or the factory and technology, but also cheap labor that made it possible. Cheap labor. Supply, the constant supply of cheap labor, because it was still a labor-intensive industry. Now, why was there a constant supply of cheap labor? Because there was huge urban migration happening at that time. A huge amount of, we'll see the numbers after some time, but you will come to know that within 100 years, at the beginning, let us say we have 90% people living in the villages and 10% in cities. एक सदी के बाद exactly उल्टा हो गया. By the beginning of 20th century, 10% people live in the villages and 90% live in the cities. ये बहुत बड़ी बात है. Never ever in the history of humanity has it happened. Never ever. भारत में भी आज इतने सालों के बाद, how much of India is urbanized? 30-40%? Not more than that. तो हमें बहुत दूर, और उसमें भी हमारी कमर टूट गई. इतने खराब शहर हो गए हमारे. Not a single city in India which is good city, livable city. Pollution देखो, sanitation देखो. It's not easy to live in India. It's not easy at all. We are actually experiencing the transition which England experienced 150 years ago. 1790 में, 1800 में, वहां पे जो गंदगी थी, वहां पे जो प्रॉब्लम्स थे, उनके शहर इतने खराब होते थे. यू रीड डिकन्स, चार्ल्स डिकन्स के जो दो किताबें, ओलिवर ट्विस्ट एंड हार्ड टाइम्स. इन द हार्ड टाइम्स आपके आंखों में आंसू आ जाएंगे. ही क्रिएट्स अ फिक्शनल टाउन कॉल्ड कोक टाउन. इन दैट कोक टाउन, कोक मतलब जिससे कोल बनता है, कोक टाउन, कोल से कोक बनता है, वो स्मेल्टिंग यूज करते फैक्ट्री फाउंड्री में. तो कोक टाउन में सब जगह धुआं 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 है. आदमी लोग मरे जा रहे हैं, एक्सीडेंट्स बहुत ज्यादा है. यू नो, मैनचेस्टर शहर, या आई डोंट रिमेंबर, लिवरपूल शायद है, मैनचेस्टर, during the first phase and second phase, what was the average lifespan of people? 17 से 20. Average lifespan of 17 से 20. That's all. हम तीनों में से तीनों मर जाते तब तक. तो my point was that it was not an easy life. आज के दिन में हम वो देख रहे हैं, huge amount of urban migration that led to cheap supply of labor. But labor was not only the urban industry labor. That labor needed food and cheap calories From where those cheap calories will come? अरे हमें लोग बचे नहीं, जो है वो काफी नहीं है, अब वो तो आएगा, वो खत्म हो गया और चाहिए. हाँ, from the colonies. In the colonies you have plantations. If you go to Haiti for example, तो वहां पे you have sugar plantations. Why is sugar so popular? शुगर का इन्वेंशन कहाँ पे हुआ पता है? शुगर इज एन इंडियन प्रोडक्ट. दुनिया में शुगर का इन्वेंशन इंडिया में हुआ, गुप्ता एरा में. यहाँ से सब जगह एक्सपोर्ट हो गया वो कॉन्सेप्ट. तो शुगर इज ए चीप सोर्स ऑफ कैलोरी. तो लेबर क्लास के लिए शुगर बहुत बढ़िया है. शुगर एंड टी एंड कॉफी पहली बार इतना जल्दी सस्ते में पी लो, काम को लग जाओ. तो ये शुगर एंड टी एंड कॉफी, हु विल प्रोड्यूस दैट? इंडियन ट्राइबल पीपल. उनको एक्सप्लॉइट करो. अफ्रीका से स्लेव पकड़ो, उनको एक्सप्लॉइट करो. You want industry to run. For industry you need machines, the gears. उसके लिए चाहिए ऑयलिंग. ऑयलिंग के लिए पाम प्लांटेशन कहाँ पे होता है? मलेशिया. मलेशिया कॉलोनाइज करो. Again, put the labor, slave labor on that. So cheap supply of labor that Madam Dean tells us, a respected Cambridge professor, is not only the urban labor working in the British factories in Manchester and Leeds and Liverpool and Dundee and all those places. उन लेबर जो उनकी जिंदगी ऑलरेडी बहुत खराब है, दे आर एट द लोएस्ट रंग इन ब्रिटिश सोसाइटी, उनको भी सप्लाई करने के लिए थर्ड वर्ल्ड कंट्री में उनसे भी निचले लोग हैं, वो जो हम लोग थे, अपने पुरखे थे. समझो आप पूरे सोशल हायरार्की को. तो ठीक, एनीवे, let us not get emotional. I'm telling myself all the time. So point is that in the first phase and also later on second phase, you have the cheap, constant supply of cheap labors. Then market. The final product was not so new that it had to create its own demand through changing tests. That started to happen from second industrial revolution, especially in the third. Advertising industry becomes very prominent during World War II and afterwards, or in the interwar era and World War II and afterwards. Have you seen that series, The Mad Men? The advertisement giants on the Madison Avenue in New York. It's a fantastic series. Mad Men kabhi dekha aap usko. But how the tests are created. I read a book by, I don't recall the author, but the book was about the Great Game. किताब का नाम ही ग्रेट गेम था, इतनी मोटी किताब थी वो. A friend of mine had gifted. तो उसमें I saw that British people are sending agents in 1860s, 1870s from India, crossing Himalaya and Tibet into Central Asia. और वो एजेंट के हाथ में क्या है? एक छोटा पैकेट ऑफ चाय की पाउडर. कि वहां के जो लोकल कम्युनिटीज वो चाय जानते नहीं है, उनको चाय की लत लगाओ. जैसे लत लगेगी, who can supply the tea? We will supply. So you create the market. Same thing you see, opium was injected into Chinese culture by British. पूरे के पूरे देश को ड्रग एडिक्ट बना दिया. आज के जो माफिया है, वो कौन सी सीरीज आई थी नेटफ्लिक्स पे ड्रग माफिया के ऊपर? एस्कोबार, पाब्लो एस्कोबार. तो ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी एस्कोबार से 10 गुना बड़ी थी, वही काम कर रही थी. It's a but anyway, you create new market, but that starts happening in the second and third industrial revolution. In the first revolution, they had no capacity for that, so they wanted to start somewhere where there is already a huge demand. And what is better than कपड़ा जो आप पहनते हो, कुछ दिनों में फेंक देते हो? Constant demand. It is a pre-existing market. That is whoever says industrial revolution says cotton, because for the cotton they did not create a market. Market pre-existed. बस वो डोमिनेट कौन करता था? इंडिया. इंडिया को से हटा हम कैप्चर करेंगे. So Indian role becomes again very central to first industrial revolution for 3 reasons. Not only that we provided huge capital because of Plassey plunder, that is true. We secondly also provided a ready-made huge market. And thirdly, we were de-industrialized. And अपने जो techniques थे ना, ये एक बात you will not see much in the British authors history writing. और यूपीएससी किताबें लिखते नहीं लोग, पता नहीं क्यों लिखते नहीं है, लिखनी चाहिए. कि the inventions, even I have said somewhere down the line, inventions were original. लिखते हुए मुझे शर्म आती है कई बार. They were not all original inventions. Industrial espionage, जो जानते हो what is industrial espionage? जब when I used to be in Purdue University, तो हमारे रिसर्च ग्रुप में ना a Chinese was gonna join for a summer season. तो वो आने से पहले मैं प्रोफेसर कॉल्ड मीटिंग ऑफ आवर ऑल रिसर्च ग्रुप, हम 15-20 लोग थे, और हमें हिदायत दी थी, चाइनीज इज कमिंग, इवन रिसर्च ग्रांट वी कांट डिनाई, बट अपने लैब में कहीं कुछ ज्यादा सवाल पूछे बताना मत, चोर होते हैं, आएंगे टेक्नोलॉजी समझेंगे, वहां जाएंगे अपने लैंग्वेज में पब्लिश कर देंगे, एंड देन कंपटीशन में आगे चले जाएंगे। तो अमेरिका ने भी वही किया था पहले भाई, जापान ने वही किया था, इंग्लैंड ने भी वही किया। इंग्लिश इंडस्ट्रियल रिवॉल्यूशन का कॉटन इंडस्ट्री के कई सारे डिजाइन, कई सारे पैटर्न्स, कई सारे प्रोसेसेस आर नथिंग बट कॉपीड फ्रॉम इंडिया। आई हैव सीन अ न्यूज इन पेपर लास्ट मंथ ओनली, एक एनसाइक्लोपीडिया बनाया था उन्होंने, कौन से डिजाइन दुनिया भर में फेमस होते हैं, गांव गांव जाके बंगाल में उन्होंने बनाए, अच्छा इसका चित्र, उसका जैसे चित्र बनाए, सैंपल्स लिए, स्टेपल किए, किताब बनाई, और किताब स्टैंडर्डाइज करके बेच दी वहां पे इंग्लैंड में, इसको कॉपी करो आपका माल बिकेगा। तो ऑल इंटेलेक्चुअल प्रॉपर्टी ऑफ इंडियन आर्टिस्ट्स एंड क्राफ्ट्समैन वाज लिटरली स्टोलन, एंड आज के दिन में भी दे डोंट गिव अस क्रेडिट फॉर दैट, बट स्टिल व्हाट एवर टीचर्स हैड इन द नोट्स, इंडिजिनियस इनोवेशंस, लिखो क्या करूं मैं। तो then spectacularly rapid progress within 25 years, cotton manufacturing became one of the most significant industries in England. In 1802 we have 4 to 5% of GDP. It's a huge thing, and after one decade it becomes almost double of that. So 10% GDP coming from one single industry, it's a huge thing. So I hope you will be able to answer the first question, that why was, अपने चाचा जी हॉफमैन साहब वो बात कहते हैं, whosoever says industrial revolution says cotton, because of the technology, because of the factory, market, labor, production, everything that happened in the first was dominated by cotton industry only. Is it clear? Let's go to the next question. Not question, next topic within that, the second phase. In the second phase, I have underlined the two transformations. The first is the growing demand for the capital goods. Although the consumer goods, the white goods remain constant and fundamental, the second phase, the additional thing is a shift towards capital goods. Good, what is capital goods? Which are not consumed by people directly, they're consumed by the industry. इंजन बना के बेचना, फैक्ट्री बना के बेच, तो उसके लिए जो स्टील चाहिए, उसके लिए जो मशीन्स चाहिए, उसकी इंडस्ट्री फॉर द इंडस्ट्री इज कैपिटल, and that is a very high level industry. So growing demand for capital goods, iron, coal, transport, railroad, etc., prepared the ground for the second phase, and that requires huge amount of money, and the capital was accumulated from the first revolution. तो उसको यहाँ पे लगाओ, money breeds money, पैसा पैसे को बनाता है, it's very true. Anyway, huge capital accumulation from the first industrial revolution in search of new avenues for investment, thus attraction of heavy capital goods industries. Usme we'll focus on two industries which are very famous and fundamental. One is the iron and steel industry. Technological transformation by 1800s, but the switch over from cotton to iron took place most distinctly by 1840s. Why could it happen? Because the demand was more. The technology reached to such a level where they can produce differential differential iron goods of different quality, of different quantity, of different size. वो capability आ गई, कौन से किस्म के iron and steel आपको चाहिए, सारे बना के देंगे. So that technological improvement was more important thing. And then iron was primarily a producer's good rather than a consumer good. It's a capital good. In 1790s, iron began to be used widely for construction work. But by 1840s, you have railroad, locomotive, machinery, precision, everything. You need everywhere, you need iron. So iron industry is extremely, extremely, extremely important along with railway. Even India became independent. हम जब फर्स्ट प्लान एंड स्पेशली सेकंड प्लान पढ़ते हैं, व्हाट डू वी रीड? दुर्गापुर, भिलाई, ये क्यों पढ़ते हैं? स्टील इंडस्ट्री का इतना इम्पैक्ट है because that is the crux of the second phase of industrial revolution. Steel है तो सब कुछ है. When you read, for example, Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, you see वो बात भी किस चीज की करती है? इंडस्ट्री, स्टील की. आपने नहीं पढ़ा ना एटलास, पढ़ना कभी यार, बढ़िया किताब. Although in this lecture, not this lecture, in this topic, in this PDF, I will get a scope to criticize Ayn Rand also. करूंगा बाद में. It helped other industrial sectors through backward and forward linkages. Backward linkage, for example, demand for raw materials, that is mining and iron ore processing. उसकी डिमांड बढ़ेगी। बैकवर्ड एंड फॉरवर्ड में रेलवे, आर्मामेंट, टेलीग्राफ पोल्स, वेरियस प्रेसिडेंट एटसेट्रा डिपो, ऑल अदर कैपिटल गुड्स बैकवर्ड पे फॉरवर्ड पे आर डिपेंडेंट ऑन स्टील प्रोडक्शन. It is the central nerve of capital industry. And then the second most important is railway industry. Two extraordinary bursts of concentrated railway investment, little mania and gigantic mania, जिसमें बहुत रेलवे बना दिए, पैसे डाल दिए, रेलवे के रेलवे लाइन बना दिए सैकड़ों किलोमीटर. Then from 1830 to 1850, from little to giant, approximately 6,000 miles of railways were opened in Britain. It's a huge thing. फिर पैसे बन गए, पैसे लगाए कहाँ? For producing 6,000 miles, they created industry. Industry, जैसे बड़ी industry जो होती है, its financial mathematics is very different. You have to put huge amount upfront and run it for 10-20 years. After that, it starts making money. सीधी बात है. तो जितनी लॉन्ग रनिंग इंडस्ट्री हो उतना आपका प्रॉफिट होगा. 5, 10, 15 साल के लिए बनाओगे तो नुकसान हो जाएगा आपका. आपको 30-40 साल की इन्वेस्टमेंट लगानी है. बट आपने लगा दिए 10-15 साल, इंग्लैंड में बन गया रेलवे. अब तो मशीन खाली बनेगा, क्या करे? पैसे है, इंडस्ट्री खाली है. वी टू प्रोड्यूस एंड पुट रेलवे समवेयर एल्स. कहाँ लगाए? इंडिया में लगाते. सो वी हैव एट दैट टाइम इन इंडिया डलहौजी. ही स्टार्ट्स रेलवे. It will help looting, extracting India. It will help the finance which is accumulated, investment. It will also help British industry. तो जो कुछ चाहिए सब इंग्लैंड से खरीदेंगे, हमारे यदि खरीदेंगे. Anyway, by 1870s, it led to worldwide economic activity, construction of railways abroad using British capital, materials and equipment. यहाँ पे इंडिया में आएगा. Railways helped to shape a new world economy in which Britain for many years lay at the center. Railway is iron and railway are a very important takeoff as per Rostov's model of economic growth. When we study Germany, we study railway unification. When we study America, railway unification. When we talk of Russia, railway, it's very important. Apart from that, we have certain additional features of British industrialization. उसमें जो पहला पॉइंट है, लिखने के लिए मैं शर्मसार होता हूँ. I would suggest कि खुददारी हो तो वो पॉइंट मत लिखो. To be very honest, indigenous innovations powered British industrial, chor log. But anyway, not completely. We have to give them credit. They have sent spies in India, in China, but they could make better use of it. तो उसके बारे में डाउट ही नहीं है. गाली देने में अच्छा लगता है, कभी कभी मजा भी आता है, गुस्सा निकलता है, but you have to give credit where it is due. You have to give the credit. So indigenous innovations powered by British Industrial Revolution, most of the machines used in production process were invented indigenously. Quality consciousness, consumer goods, and guided by capital interest, private or profit motive. It was simple, and it was a long drawn-out process, lambi process. So there is nothing here. If at all they happen to ask a question on the features, you will write these features also, if at all. But I don't see. They are more interested over last 25-30 years in the causes, and more than that into the consequences side of all the questions. 33% questions have come from causes and 66% questions have come from the consequences. So we have to prepare consequences in much more detail. ठीक है.